You know that feeling. You figure out that you can do two things at once: exercise and save money by walking instead of taking a taxi. Study Korean and enjoy yourself by watching Korean dramas. Cook a big meal on Sunday and have lunches ready for the entire week. And for a moment, you feel genuinely clever. Efficient. Like you found a small secret that other people missed. Koreans have a perfect 4-character phrase for that feeling. 일석이조. 일석이조. One stone, two birds. Welcome back to K-Wisdom, where 4 characters hold thousands of years of wisdom. And today a surprise. Because the story of 일석이조 is not what anyone expects. Here is something that genuinely surprises almost every Korean person who hears it. 일석이조, one of the most commonly used 4-character idioms in the Korean language, used by millions of people every single day, is not originally Korean. It is not originally Chinese either. It came from English, specifically, from a British saying that has existed since at least the 1600s. A saying that most of you have heard in its original form your entire lives. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. 4 characters, ancient looking, deeply Korean feeling, and originally completely British. Before we get to the full story, let's break down the 4 characters. Yi il, 1. Shi sok, stone. I, 2. Tori jo, bird. 1 stone, 2 birds. The meaning is exactly what it looks like: doing one thing and getting 2 benefits at once. Solving 2 problems with 1 solution. Achieving 2 goals with 1 well-aimed effort. Simple, visual, satisfying, and as we are about to discover, far more widely traveled than anyone realizes. Somewhere in Britain, sometime in the 1600s or earlier, someone threw a stone. We don't know who. We don't know exactly when. We don't know if they were a farmer, a philosopher, a hunter, or someone just walking home who got lucky. But when the stone hit 2 birds at once, they noticed something. 1 action, 2 results. And they said or wrote, or told a friend that this was a useful way to think about solving problems. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. It was practical, visual, easy to remember. And it stuck. For the next 200 years, this phrase lived happily in the English-speaking world, crossing the Atlantic, appearing in books and letters and everyday conversation, carrying its simple wisdom about efficiency from one generation to the next. Until the late 1800s, when it arrived somewhere new. The Meiji era in Japan, roughly 1868 to 1912, was one of the most extraordinary periods of cultural exchange in Asian history. Japan opened its doors to the Western world after centuries of isolation, and ideas, technologies, words, and phrases flooded in at extraordinary speed. Japanese scholars worked around the clock to translate Western concepts into their language, creating new words, adapting old ones, rebuilding foreign ideas in characters that Japanese readers could understand. And somewhere in that extraordinary moment of translation, in a room we will never see, by a scholar whose name we will never know, someone picked up an English book. Read the phrase, "Kill 2 birds with 1 stone," looked at their blank paper, and wrote "Issekinicho," 1 stone, 2 birds. In that moment, a British proverb became a Japanese expression. And the long journey of ilseohiho had truly begun. From Japan, Issekinicho traveled to Korea. As many Japanese coined expressions did during the period of Japanese influence in the early 20th century, it arrived in the Korean language and found a home there. Korean speakers adopted it. It fit naturally. It was memorable, visual, and genuinely useful. And over the decades, through the colonial period, through liberation, through the Korean War, through the economic miracle of the following generations, it became so thoroughly embedded in everyday Korean that most people today think of it as a native Korean expression. Or at the very least, an ancient Chinese one. It is neither. It is a British proverb. Translated by a Japanese scholar. Adopted by Korean speakers. Now used by millions of people every day with no memory of where it came from. Pause for a moment and think about what this means. A phrase born in Britain in the 1600s or earlier, by a person whose name history never recorded, is now part of the living Korean language. Used in Korean text messages. In Korean business meetings. In Korean classrooms where children learn it as one of the first 4-character expressions they ever encounter. That anonymous British person had no idea their words would cross the Pacific. Had no idea a Japanese scholar would one day hold their phrase in one hand and a writing brush in the other. Had no idea that millions of people in a country they likely never heard of would use their words every day. But that is how ideas work. They travel, they transform, they outlast everyone who created them. The words you say today, the ideas you express, the phrases you coin may travel further than you ever imagine. Here is something beautiful about ilseohiho. The idea it expresses is so deeply human that almost every culture has their own version. In English, kill two birds with one stone. In Korean, ilseohiho, one stone, two birds. In Chinese, yi ju liang day, one action, two gains. In French, faire d'une pierre deux coups, one strike, two hits. Different images, different animals, different tools, the same idea. Because the desire to be efficient, to get more from less, to solve two problems at once, to find the well-aimed action that achieves multiple goals is not a cultural desire. It is a human desire. It lives in every language because it lives in every person. This is what makes ilseohiho more than just a cute phrase about efficiency. It is actually a way of seeing. Most people approach a task and ask, how do I get this done? But the ilseohiho mindset asks a different question: how do I get this done and something else at the same time? Walking instead of driving gets you somewhere, but it also gets you exercise, fresh air, time to think, and money saved. Learning a language by watching shows in that language gets you vocabulary. But it also gets you entertainment, cultural understanding, and something to look forward to every day. The task is the stone. The goals are the birds. The skill is learning to see when two birds are sitting close enough together to reach with one well-aimed throw. But here is an important warning that comes with the ilseohiho mindset. In Korean, there is a related saying, "Du mali takalil jachde gadul da nochinda." Chase two rabbits and you catch neither. Not all attempts to achieve two things at once actually work. Sometimes the two goals compete for your attention and end up undermining each other. You try to cook dinner and take a work call and you burn the food while missing the important part of the call. Ilseohiho works when the two goals genuinely align, when doing one naturally advances the other. It fails when the two goals pull in different directions and split your focus. The wisdom is not just in looking for ilseohiho opportunities. It is in knowing the difference between goals that can genuinely travel together and goals that need their own stone. Once you start looking for ilseohiho, you see it everywhere. Walking to work, you arrive and you exercised and you saved money. Learning a language by watching dramas, you studied and you enjoyed yourself and you understand a new culture better. Cooking a big batch of food on Sunday, you ate well and you saved yourself stress every morning for the rest of the week. Volunteering somewhere, you want to develop skills, you contributed and you learned and you built connections. Every task, every challenge, every decision carries within it the possibility of ilseohiho if you think to look for it. If you pause for one moment and ask, is there something else I care about that this action could also advance? Now here is a final beautiful irony that has been sitting quietly in this whole story. The journey of ilseohiho from Britain to Japan to Korea is itself a perfect example of the concept it describes. By borrowing this phrase, Japanese and Korean speakers got two things from one action. They got a useful and memorable expression for an important idea, and they got, without knowing it, a living record of how language and culture travel across the world. Ilseohiho is its own ilseohiho, one phrase, two lessons, how to be more efficient with your energy, and how ideas like birds travel farther than anyone expects, and land in places their creators never imagined. Ilseohiho has been part of the Korean language for over a century now. It has outlasted the Meiji era that gave it its Japanese form. It has outlasted the colonial period that brought it to Korea. It has traveled from formal written texts into casual everyday speech, from newspaper headlines into text messages between friends. And it carries with it, invisible, unnoticed, completely unsuspected, the trace of a stone thrown in an English field by someone whose name nobody remembers. That person said something. It traveled. It transformed. It is still traveling. Think about the unnamed Japanese scholar who first wrote Iseki Nichou. They were doing their job, translating, bridging, building pathways between languages so that ideas could cross borders. They probably did not think of it as a historic act. It was just a phrase. Just a translation. Just another late night with a writing brush and a stack of Western books to get through. They had no idea that their quiet work would travel across the sea. That their characters would be adopted into a neighboring language. That over 100 years later, millions of people would be using the phrase they wrote in Korean conversations, in Korean classrooms, and Korean text messages. They just did their work well. And the work traveled. There is something quietly moving about that. About how the careful work of one unnamed person, done without recognition, without any expectation of consequence, can ripple forward through time in ways they could never have foreseen. And that is perhaps the deepest lesson hiding inside ilseohiho. Not just be efficient, do two things with one action. But your ideas travel further than you think. The British person who first said, "Kill two birds with one stone," had no idea their words would end up in Asia. The Japanese scholar who translated it had no idea it would become part of everyday Korean speech. Every person who uses ilseohiho today is carrying, without knowing it, a thread that reaches back centuries and across continents. The things you say, the ideas you share, the work you do carefully and well, they have a reach you cannot see and cannot predict. Ilseohiho. 1 action, 2 results, but sometimes far more than 2. Sometimes the ripples keep going long after the stone has sunk. So here is the question Ilseohiho quietly asks all of us. Not just where can I be more efficient, but what matters to me right now? And is there a way that pursuing one thing I care about could also advance another? Where are you doing things separately that could be done together? Where are you solving one problem when you could, with a small shift in approach, solve 2? Where is there a stone already in your hand and 2 birds sitting closer together than you noticed? This is not about being ruthlessly productive all the time. Rest is Ilseohiho too. It restores your energy and your creativity and your capacity for everything else. Sometimes single-minded focus is exactly right. But sometimes more often than we realize there is a well-aimed throw waiting to be made. That is Ilseohiho. 1 stone, 2 birds. Born in Britain, translated in Japan, adopted in Korea, used everywhere. A phrase that teaches efficiency, creativity, and the satisfying pleasure of finding 2 good things in one well-aimed action. And a reminder hidden inside the story of how it traveled here that ideas are never just ideas. They are living things. They move. They find new homes. They arrive in languages and cultures their creators never imagined, and they keep working, keep teaching, keep connecting people across centuries and oceans without any of them knowing it. The stone was thrown a long time ago. It is still in the air. So here is your question for today. What is your Ilseohiho right now? What is one thing you are doing or could start doing that would give you 2 good things at once? And here is a second question, if you want to go deeper. Think about the ideas and words you share with others every day. The things you say to friends, to family, to strangers online. Do you know how far they travel? Do you know whose life they might reach? You are throwing stones all the time. You just cannot always see where they land. Tell us in the comments. We would love to hear your Ilseohiho stories and your thoughts on how far ideas travel. The stone was thrown in Britain. It landed in Japan. It flew again and landed in Korea. And it is still flying, still being thrown every day in millions of conversations, messages, and meetings by people who have never heard of the English field where it all started. Ilseohiho. 1 stone, 2 birds, infinite ripples. Thank you for watching K-Wisdom, where 4 characters hold thousands of years of wisdom. And occasionally a few hundred years of quietly borrowed British wisdom that somehow became Korean anyway. If this stayed with you, if something in this story is still flying around in your mind, please like and subscribe. There are many more 4 characters waiting. See you next time on K-Wisdom.